everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Tuesday, and we are taking a look at a new artist this week. That artist is Liam Sharp, still in the comic biz to this day. Currently working on some Conan stuff that looks really cool. This issue is Death's Head 2, issue number 2, cover dated April 1992. My introduction, my earliest memory of Liam Sharp is this cover here. For a few reasons. One, even back then, I realized that he was kind of aping that Jim Lee aesthetic, that Scott Williams West Coast kind of look in the inks. Here he's inking himself on the cover, so I do feel like a little bit more of his naturalistic style is shining through, even though he's doing that Jim Lee look. Slightly thicker lines in the hatching, slightly grittier kind of feel to it. Whether of his own accord or at an editor's suggestion, it makes sense back in 1992 when Jim Lee is really at the height of his popularity. When something's working really well in the comic biz, in movies and stuff, people tend to ape and copy that stuff, so that's what's going on here. As applied to Reed Richards, though, I don't know how well it works. I think it works well with Death's Head, but this Reed Richards just looks way too angry and evil for what I know of Reed Richards. It's kind of two aesthetics clashing here. The classic 60s style costume with the 90s aesthetic and the gritted teeth and the shadows and hatching. Always wondered, seeing these ads back in the days, Reed Richards all of a sudden gone evil, or is he an evil clone of Reed Richards? It just didn't seem to jive with his personality at all. The Fantastic Four, for some reason, seemed to not evolve through the decades like the other Marvel characters did, you know, like Spider-Man or the X-Men. They always seem to be, or work best, to me anyways, in the 60s. And proof of that, I think, is the recent Marvel Fantastic Four movie, which also takes place in that retro kind of 60s timeline. Again, I think that's where the Fantastic Four seem to work best. Other than that, not much to say about this cover. Let's crack her open and have a look inside. We'll mention this is a Marvel UK book, which was an imprint back in the early 90s that was created by British creators, creating characters for Marvel, and more often than not having Marvel mainstream characters guest star in the book to help get it across to a North American market, right? Kind of funny and ironic that you've got a Terminator 2 ad, because a lot of the tropes in this book are taken from Terminator 2. We've got a killer cyborg coming from the future into the past to kill someone. So right there, that's, you know, full on Terminator inspiration. Even the way he comes back, the teleportation into the past, the kind of lightning effects and stuff, very reminiscent of when Arnold comes back in Terminator, right? The smoke coming off the body and stuff. So I think a lot of the inspiration for this is coming from there. Story, Dan Abnett, pencils Liam Sharp, inks Andy Lanning, colors Helen Stone, lettering Carolyn Steeden, and Perry Godbold. Godbold is a very interesting name, I gotta say. So we start off with Reed Richards here, kind of dressed up nice and fancy, waiting for his wife in a fancy restaurant. She's at a charity event and calls him up to let him know that she's going to be a little bit late. And while he's waiting, we have this character just kind of appear out of nowhere. Very much a Mad Max vibe, so you can assume this is maybe coming from a post-apocalyptic future that we've talked about. The year 2020, always funny because now we are past that. So I guess that future never came to pass. And she introduces herself to Reed Richards and tells him he's in danger and they have to get out of here. Here's another example of, you know, that Jim Lee aesthetic that they're trying to apply here. But, you know, it's been mentioned before by other people, but, you know, the idea that artists copying Jim Lee could kind of see the type of lines he was using, but not exactly the reasons why he was using them and where he was applying them in the shading and stuff. So it ends up looking a little odd and out of place on Reed Richards' face here. Just so many lines. And now we see the reason, turning the page, why Reed Richards has to escape. Minion has come back in time. I guess in issue 1 this happened. I don't know for sure because I don't have it, but the original Death's Head was destroyed and integrated into this body. And ever since, it's been wreaking havoc with this character's programming, which is to seek out historic figures and the knowledge that they have, just like Reed Richards. So now, since Death's Head is incorporated into his programming, he's becoming a lot more murderous. And to gain that information, basically the idea is that he's killing the people who have it. So our, I believe her name is Evelyn. Let me just double check that so I don't say something stupid as we're going. Yeah, Evelyn. So Evelyn is there to protect Reed Richards. Why does she know all this? Well, she's the one who programmed Dominion originally. And now, you know, she's trying to fix her mistake you know, because of that integration of Death's Head. Dominion is going on a rampage, and a murderous rampage at that, right? So the action starts off. We don't get Reed Richards using his powers a lot in this issue, but here kind of a funny thing where his arm stretches out to get the driver of this taxi out so they can commandeer the taxi to get away from Death's Head. I thought this was kind of an interesting little bit of story where personal note, local paving's unsuitable for even mid-range acceleration. So Death's Head is basically saying, or Minion in this case up to this point, that, you know, he can't run as fast as he usually would because I guess the impact on the asphalt is making it just break up and slowing him down. So he can't be going at full speed is basically what he's saying here. Clever way of not having to draw too many backgrounds here, artistic wise as well, is, you know, you've got kind of the silhouette of the buildings, but throwing in those motion lines and speed lines to get across the idea of how fast Minion is kind of running across. I gotta say, in this shot here, you know, I can kind of see, as I said, the Terminator influence, but it's almost like, you know, he's mixed in a bit of Alien and for the movie Alien or Aliens design and Predator. You know, there's all those kind of movies I feel are influencing the look of this character here. Cool shot here. This takes a lot of work, lots of debris, creating layering and foreshortening throughout the panel. I think that works really well. And again, if you look at the hatching here, it's a lot more controlled and slicker, I feel. So not quite as exciting as the artwork on the cover. Just like I said, a little more subdued and not quite as kinetic, I guess, as what we got on the cover. Here we see the future, right, where Minion escaped from, and the original Death's Head has been left basically in shambles and pieces here. So back to the present. This is where the Thing is going to get involved. I really like this shot of the Thing here. I don't know what it is, but I just like the personality and the kind of emotion we're getting across with this face. And finding out that there's been some sort of disturbance downtown, so he's going to be joining the action pretty soon. Like this panel here where, you know, he's leaving a lot out and just using a lot of kind of speed lines to define the shapes and the action that's happening. Almost kind of not exactly a manga aesthetic, but kind of a manga mindset in this panel here. And the light coloring, I think, even adds to that effect here. As they cross the bridge, I feel like this here is a statted image or a traced image of the bridge. You know, sometimes drawing something architecturally complicated, it's just simpler to, you know, trace a picture or actually photocopy and stat that in, stick it in, draw your other elements on top. Of course, eventually Death's Head catches up with them and blows up the taxi. So another example of Reed Richards using his powers here to save Evelyn and himself. I like the design here of things showing up, the motorcycle, the flying motorcycle that he's riding or driving. I think the design is really good and could even work today in modern times. It doesn't feel dated in any way other than the aesthetic and the hatching that's applied on top of it. So Thing intervening here to protect Reed Richards and Evelyn, of course, getting blown up for his troubles here. It's going to take a little bit more than that to take the Thing down. There's definitely, again, that 90s aesthetic applied to the Thing here, but I think it works pretty well. As far as the layout goes, these two pages I think are a good example of 90s style layouts as well. We've got the long vertical panels, right? We've got the panels overlapping other panels. We've got characters popping out of the frame. We've got stuff done outside of frames here. And just in the negative space of the page, right here you can see, like I said, the overlap of the Thing's arm and then the overlap of this panel on top of that, which right away creates 1, 2, and 3 different layers that you wouldn't get if you had a more traditional kind of panel layout cut off here where the arm was within the frame. So, I mean, story-wise, there's not much to say more other than the fact that it's basically just one long chase scene all the way throughout. Death's Head running after Reed Richards to murder him, again, to acquire his knowledge. I like this vertical panel here. So vertical action, a character falling off a bridge onto a boat. Obviously makes sense to make a nice long vertical panel for that. The coloring overall is pretty good, I think. This is not yet computer coloring, but we're getting different kind of values of each of the colors that are being used. Some of the lighting effects I think work really well here. The green that's being used for the reflection of the screens on Reed Richards' face here and here work really well for me. Here we're getting a really cool double page splash page being used very efficiently. So you still get that double splash kind of image, but it's been reduced a little bit to still include a little bit of storytelling. You've got a sequence here kind of all in one, almost like a separate page, which is kind of interesting. I don't see a lot of that. And then, you know, you've still got some storytelling added on to keep the story moving until we get to this big kind of money shot panel of Death's Head busting into the Fantastic Four's lab. Love all the technology and the tech that he's drawn in the back here. It looks really cool. So Reed Richards has basically ascertained that, you know, all the different personalities within the Minion are kind of at odds with each other. So he's created a beam that's going to give Death's Head kind of control over the whole thing rather than all those personalities fighting amongst each other within Minion's programming. So hit with the beam here, And we see the result where Death's Head no longer, or Minion, let's say, no longer wanting to kill Reed Richards. But now that Death's Head is more in control, he's a little more intellectual and has figured out that he can just collect all that knowledge and data from the Fantastic Four's computers rather than actually killing Reed Richards. Artistically, once again, I really like this shot here of Death's Head. Here we're getting almost that Todd McFarlane kind of thing where he would, you know, instead of filling something in with a dark shadow and almost being a silhouette, he'll leave it open and throw in some hatching lines. So I definitely feel like this is more of a Todd McFarlane thing than a Jim Lee thing. And once he's done that, well, we've basically got our characters returning back to the future. And, you know, as Evelyn kissed Reed Richards early on, you can see her lipstick on the side of his face here. The Fantastic Four show up finally, a little bit too late to help out in this kind of adventure. And just Sue, a funny moment of Sue noticing the kiss here. And he says, "I hope I did the right thing." And she says, "I hope so too, Buster." So Reed might be in trouble there. And the book finishes off with, you know, the scientist who's been looking at Death's Head body getting punched in the face, and what I assume is going to be the villain for next issue showing up. I wanted to say again, art-wise, I like all these cast shadows from the wires on this guy's body. I think that works really well. And the reflections down here on the table, just there's something really cool about, you know, the shadows on the figures here, you know, more organic and rounded off and stuff, being turned into like just straight up reflective shadows on the table here. I think that works really well and looks really good. So this kind of puts a date on this book and what was coming out at that time, right? Operation Galactic Storm. Never really got into that, but I remember that period and seeing ads for it. I'm not sure who that artist is. Definitely more of an 80s style artist, still working in the early 90s. As opposed to the whole 90s aesthetic from the Image guys, right? So this was the Uncanny X-Men trading card set. So I guess, yeah, that was coming out in around the same time as Jim Lee was working on X-Men. And I'll be doing a review of those books that I got in my latest comics haul that kind of blow up the art from those cards. I'll be looking at that sometime soon in the future. We're getting a little bit more information about, you know, Marvel UK and other books and stuff. I'm not quite sure who this artist is. It might be mentioned somewhere in here, but just in a very interesting style. I kind of like what I see here and would like to see more of it. Not quite sure who that is. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments who that artist is. Here's another shot of the X-Men who are going to be guest starring in Motormouth, I guess. And once again, you can tell this is not Liam Sharp. This is another artist, but definitely once again, a similar aesthetic, aping that Jim Lee West Coast look. That was a big thing back then. And I was surprised to see this. Didn't know this actually existed. The back of the comic is, I guess, an alternate cover, or maybe a cover that was not accepted as the final cover. You know, the figures work really well, but the background maybe is a little bit kind of bland. So maybe that's why it was skipped over for another cover. I'm not quite sure, but still a fun kind of pinup. And again, I feel like Liam Sharp is inking himself here, so it looks a little bit more organic and a little less kind of ripped off directly from Jim Lee in its aesthetic. Definitely like Liam Sharp's art when he's inking himself more so than when someone else is inking him. All right, there you go, guys. That is my review of Death's Head 2, issue number 2. If you're still watching and you are subscribed, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your support. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you, and it really helps the channel out, helps us grow, and helps get us out there to other people who are in comic books just like we are. So everyone, thanks once again, and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13. 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.